Welcome to Law Focus. I'm Edward St. Pé. This is Law Focus with Nathan Prescott and a live presentation of the program today. Nathan, great to see you.
You know, I have to say it live from Ocean Springs. It's Law Focus. I'm really pleased to be here. One thing that's interesting is that my court this morning involved the topic that we're going to discuss today a little later in the day. It's the Guard and Protect Act, or a Conservatorship Act. And the reason we're going to talk about it, remember that Law Focus is very interested in talking about not only the law generally, but also the law as it applies to us and as it shows up in the news. So today I hope we'll be able to address the GAP Act in Mississippi and how that relates to the big Free Britney movement, Britney Spears and her conservatorship, which is perfect fodder for the news and is very interesting, and I think really works into our show. So what you got there?
Well, this is a Mississippi Association of Broadcasters Award Certificate of Excellence, and this is an award that was received by
Let me see that thing. I've never touched it.
Law Focus won that award at the recent convention for the Public Affairs Program.
Boom!
For 2020.
Fire!
So anyway, we were in competition with a lot of big stations around the state, and our program from August 19th,
2020, here it says.
2020.
Law Focus, episode 28, August 19, 2020. Third place public affairs program.
Right, and so I think first place was, it could have been WLBT in Jackson, one of the big stations. But we had...
How did they do that? Did they go out and just sample one of our shows at random?
Well, we entered.
Okay.
We were a member of the Mississippi Association of Broadcasters.
So that was during our, what were we covering during
COVID.
that? Oh, we were covering COVID during that time.
I think we have a clip from that show that actually won. So why don't we, if we can, take a view of
memory lane. I wonder how I look. I've changed a lot in a year.
Did you like one of the flags?
I like green.
Do you like the green one?
Well, I mean, red and blue just seems a little overdone for us now. When we see a lot of red and blue, our nation is red and blue. I appreciate that.
Green is good.
I love blue. I wear blue all the time. Blue is my color, especially navy. I like that a lot. But green, for some reason, dead center green. The dead center green flag.
One in the middle there?
Yeah, it sort of strikes
me.
Well, yeah, that looks like, but it also looks like a little something out of like a Tolkien novel or something, right? Like, you know, sort of fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I kind of like that one too, really. That would be the one. What is the tree, though? Is it?
I guess that's a magnolia, but you know, a flag like that probably has some symbolism in it that we don't know about, like those stars. You know, like when we joined the union. You know, those kinds of things.
Well, that was a clip. So what helped us to win? I don't know, but I don't think it was necessarily that shot of that newspaper right there. But I think that it was the totality of the show, and probably we were in the middle of the COVID stuff, so that was probably a good solid part of it. You know?
Well, isn't that neat to look back on it? You know, we've been through a lot of journeys. We had the COVID, and we got the Britney thing now, which is small, but I remember doing a show on A$AP Rocky. I remember doing a show on the flag. You know, we've got some different acts, so it's really neat for me, and it's frankly just pride-inducing. I'm proud to look back on something from about a year ago and say, oh, dang, we did that, and people watched, and it was impressed, and we're impressed by it.
We came in, and that was among the other stations across the state, so we came in with that. So I'm happy about it, very proud.
Boom.
So we got an award. So
we did. Well, congratulations to you, and congratulations to me, and congratulations to us all. That was fun.
You know, we get a lot of good feedback about the show from folks out there. So because it's a great way to learn about the current law and what's happening. So, and it's free right over the air. You know? we put a new antenna up maybe about 3 or 4 months ago. And what that did for us is, you know, we jumped generations of antenna. The station has still been operating on the original antenna up on top of the big tower, right, broadcasting the signal.
In Pascagoula?
In Van Cleve.
Okay, in Van Cleve.
So what we did is we put a new antenna on top of the tower. And that antenna we've got it's a German antenna, same company, but that was the original supplier of the antenna, but generations ahead from where we were.
Nice.
You know.
So our broadcast footprint is larger.
It's larger. It's fuller. It's a little more, I think, solid out there. And also, here's another thing that's happened since the last show that you and I did. A syndicator from New York called me.
Yeah.
And he said, I want you to look at this particular program we're talking about and we want you to carry it.
Okay.
It's MGM. Sure. And so this particular syndicated show, I said, well, I'm interested in it, and it looks pretty good. And he said, well, you had pretty good ratings in the last ratings book. And he said, we just discovered you guys, and we'd like you to have this show. We'd like to be on your station. I said, wait a minute. You mean good ratings in the ratings book that comes out for all stations? He said, yeah. He said, you're pulling 3s and 4s throughout the afternoon, from afternoon through evening. He said, and that's pretty good. He said, you got good numbers. I said, wait a minute. So after I picked myself up out of the chair, off the floor, and got back in the chair, he reiterated. And so that's a big breakthrough for this station, because this is a station that was in Pascagoula. We moved to Ocean Springs. Our signal is, we're not the biggest station in the world, but for a small station like this to be able to be picking up ratings
and winning awards,
but picking up ratings against the big stations in this market is almost miraculous, in my opinion, because the big stations, are big stations, and they've got hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in a thing. We are sort of, a little station that, that landed in Ocean Springs. For us to have some people watching out there with numbers,
numbers that show up,
is a great thing. So that's a great development.
Yay!
So I'm happy to report that, and that's because of our viewers. People like the programming. The baby boomer programming that we have with Antenna TV is the type of thing. It's it's adult demographic. Let's just call it maybe 35 plus, 30 plus in general, 35 plus all the way to 95. So these people are adults, and they have money to spend.
Right.
And this is a good demographic.
Well, let's give them some content.
Let's give them something they can use.
Right. So the first thing, and welcome, the first thing that I'd like to talk about today is Britney Spears. 13 years ago or so, back in 2007, Britney Spears was going through a time in her life, and I've gleaned this from reading and from watching and doing whatever I needed to do, but was going through a time in her life that was challenging to her, right? She was having children, maybe she was going through a breakdown of some sort, but she was very popular in her career, and she had been popular before. So her father and others appealed to the court and got her under a conservatorship, right? And that conservatorship has existed for the previous 13 or 14 years. Edward has a look on his face as if he ate something very sour. He's totally anathema to you, huh?
First off, the immense pressure that a young person would be under.
Right. So let's just say she's around, I don't know, let's just say she would be 25 back then. Right.
And she's a world famous entertainer, and for God's sake, and in the public eye, she has a bit of a moment out there. Everybody has a moment. She had a moment. She deserves to have a moment after that type of international celebrity, right?
Sure.
And then, but for them to, it seems like it's an abuse of their power. It's a stretch because 13 years is a long time.
Yeah, 13 years is a long time. But let's first get into the phase that had her committed in the conservatorship, and then we'll work through why it's been existent for that long. So in Mississippi, like in other states, there are provisions in place, safeguard protections that prevent people from gaining conservatorship. So in Mississippi, unlike in California, we call it conservatorship. There's a conservator, that's the party that overlooks the person, and then there's a ward, that's what we call the person that may be incompetent. I've heard in other jurisdictions it's called conservator and conservatee. There's different language in Louisiana as often, but we're going to use for the terms of this to define this show. We've got a conservatorship, that's the umbrella, that's what exists, that's the legal construct. We've got a conservator, that's the overseer, and we've got a ward, that's the person who needs help, okay? And so in these kinds of circumstances, Britney Spears would be considered the ward. Conservator, ward, conservatorship. Now that we have that construct, I think we can move and sort of paint in the lines. But in Mississippi, in order to get a conservatorship set up, 2 doctors, or a doctor and a nurse practitioner, or a doctor and a psychologist, have to attest that this party is incapable of managing her or his estate and affairs. Now, that's after a physical examination, and there's this magic thaumaturgic language that says that is the situation, unable to manage estate and affairs.
So you have to be incompetent.
You have to be unable to manage estate and affairs, right? That's, I guess our vernacular or our basic conversation would say incompetent, but unable to manage estate and affairs worthy of conservatorship is that magic language that we need in our state to establish that kind of conservatorship. Now, recently, so for 30 years, that was all we needed, right? Recently, in January of 2020, now the act was enacted by Governor Phil Bryant and others, including a Supreme Court Justice or Appeals Court Justice, Dawn Beam, who was a chancellor. And they said, we need some reform here. Now, we need some reform to prevent abuses within the conservatorship situation in Mississippi. Now, if we need reform within Mississippi, imagine that's the same kind of thing that could be happening in California. The reason we needed reform in Mississippi is because there was some question regarding what was happening within these conservatorships and whether there was an abuse of power over the conservator to the ward. Sounds familiar, huh? I mean, that might be exactly what's happening in the Spears context. So what happened was in April of 2019, Phil Bryant signed the GAP Act into law. It became effective, and we all began to practice it in January of 2020. Now, what does the GAP Act do that was different than the general conservatorship statutes? Well, now we have a physician statement in the GAP Act, which is much, much, much more in depth than just a basic statement of physician, which would say a person is incompetent to manage their estate and affairs.
You have to explain what's happening.
I would love to show you this in our private time. This form, you could see how this form, if filled out, sure, you know, the first thing that's going to happen is the doctors are going to say, this is cumbersome, this is onerous, this is burdensome, this is too much, I'm busy. You know, reading x-rays or doing doctor stuff, right? But this form is in place to protect a ward who may not need a conservator. It's serious. So it goes from one statement of physician that says unable to manage estate and affairs to 3 pages of I examined this person on this date, this is how old they were, this is what their cognitive ability was, this is how they did on these certain standardized tests. It gets very serious. Mm-hmm. Now, Edward, if somebody were coming at you, right, and trying to, like you had a bad incident, right? Maybe you fell and hit your head, and you were in and out of competency, or you're doing things that weren't like Edward. Would you rather the physician have to fill out the 1 paragraph thing that says you're unable to manage estate and affairs, or would you rather have them examine you and make a determination based on their medical expertise, to the extent they have any, and to the extent that there's, you know, they can cognitively make those determinations, and sort of then determine that you needed a conservatorship.
Right, number 2, right.
Obviously, right? It protects the ward. That's why the GAP Act is short for Guard and Protect Act, right?
Wow.
Yeah, so there's little things like that in place that go out there. Now, I personally haven't seen what happened in Brittany's situation. I don't know what kind of examination she had, and sometimes those medical records are private. Mm-hmm. But imagine if Brittany had 5 pages of GAP Act information, we had access to it. Sure, they might say she shaved her head, or she had children, or she married somebody and got divorced. But Edward, that's what's interesting. Humans are so broad. We can do anything. We're people of multitudes, right? You might want to go to Disney World every weekend at 3 a.m. I don't know. Or you might want to, wake up in the middle of the night and have a cup of coffee against your best interest. I don't know. But does that mean you're incompetent to manage your estate and affairs? Does that mean that 2 doctors can come in and say, hey, look, Edward, we understand that one of your basic human rights is the right to bodily autonomy. It's the right to be able to do what you want with your body. But because 2 doctors said you're unable to manage your estate and affairs, we're going to take that from you. I don't like that, Edward. I'm glad the Guard and Protect Act is in place.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And people have ulterior motives, so
sure,
in this world. So, I mean, especially in a situation like that. Even family, even your father can, could be swayed by, $100 million,
Yeah. So we'll get into a little more deeply after the break. But Brittany's family in this circumstance, this is what's nutty, and I want y'all all to savor this aspect of it during the commercial. But Brittany's family in this, right? Brittany's under a conservatorship. Remember, she can't manage her estate and her affairs, right? Essentially, is how the Mississippi, during all this period of time. But she does a whole year's worth of shows in Las Vegas where her father is paid to manage her. They get paid. He gets a percentage of her performance every night. It feels like indentured servitude. It feels like it doesn't pass the smell test with me. But when we come back, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you how some things in the GAP Act, that's Guard and Protect Act, not only from its upstart, but also in its monitoring system, might have protected Brittany and could one day protect you or someone you love or someone you know.
Okay, we'll be right back with more Law Focus after this.
Thank you.
Let's put our heads together on a great staycation. Berry Creek Cabins in nearby Bogalusa, Louisiana is your wilderness staycation headquarters. Cozy cabin lodging for 4 to 12 people with modern amenities, kitchens, relaxing porches, fishing, and a 2,700 square foot party deck pavilion. Call 985-730-4395 or berrycreekcabins.com. Berry Creek Cabins is family staycation headquarters. Ocean 7 Television, and Carl the Downtown Rooster. You might say they've got a lot in common. Ocean 7 is the only television station operating from Ocean Springs, and Carl the Rooster is the only rooster walking around downtown Ocean Springs. Carl the Rooster and Ocean 7, two of a kind.
Okay, we're back with Law Focus. Nathan Prescott. So we're talking about Britney Spears.
Yeah, so earlier we were talking, I'm going to just jump right into it because I think we got about 10 more minutes in the show and I want to, I really want to hit it. So let's just get skiing on it. So what we've got is, we talked about how our GAP Act, our Guardian and Protect Act may have helped Brittany on the lead-in, but then we got 13 years span of time, right? We got a 13-year span. What was happening during that period of time? Well, I'm not a California lawyer, and I advise everybody to seek independent legal advice to the extent that they need to. But and if you need to call me, Nathan.Prescott at pnp.org, and there's my telephone number. But if the GAP Act was honored, so you've got a law, but we've talked about this before in the COVID mandates and things like that. What is a law unless it's enforced, right? So you've got a law now in the GAP Act that says that they've got these monitoring systems in place that might have helped Brittany and would help you, your family, anybody else that needs a conservatorship. What are those kinds of checks and balances? Well, the judge can order a yearly checkup of the ward. Oh no! If you had a yearly checkup, or the judge could order a bi-yearly, every twice a year checkup of the ward. What the GAP Act, the Guard and Protect Act, is in place to do is to make sure that the conservatorship, to the extent that it's existent, is not overreaching. That it serves the most basic needs, but it does not overreach. So if Brittany says, well, yeah, in 2007. I was suffering, but here in 2008, look at me, I'm making a bunch of money in Las Vegas, or 2012 or 2014, who knows? If that kind of act was in place and those kinds of checks and balances in place, I find it hard to believe that the conservatorship would continue to go on.
Sure.
So we've got, not only in our Mississippi's GAP Act do we have these great checks and balances on the front end, which require a more in-depth statement of physician, but we also have the capacity for the judge to make yearly check-ins, and a yearly check-in like this would have been very meaningful. Now, another thing right? So you got, who does the lawyer for the ward, that's the lawyer for Britney Spears, the lawyer for anybody that's incompetent, serve? Do they serve the conservatorship or do they serve the ward? That's a good, interesting question, right? So in one of the most recent hearings where Britney Spears was allowed to speak, she came out and said, point blank, in the discussion, I don't want my dad serving as my conservator. And the judge said, well, why didn't you tell us about this? It's been over a decade since this conservatorship was formed. Where were we? And she said, well, honestly, I didn't know. The lawyer didn't tell me. Now, I don't know if that's true. I don't have any idea what goes on behind closed doors between an attorney and their client. That's privileged information. But we do need to be aware that it's not only upon the lawyer, it's not only upon the law and the judge, but also on the lawyer. If you're a lawyer and you represent a ward, you got to serve that ward. And what does every human generally want? A human wants freedom. And the conservatorship is restrictive. It's not. It's an oppression. It's not freedom. It's a taking away of rights, right? So that lawyer advocating for, there's already a lawyer for the conservatorship. There's a lawyer for that umbrella structure, but there's also sometimes a lawyer for the ward. They also call him a guardian ad litem or a protective guardian, right? And that lawyer, it's incumbent upon them to do everything in their power every day to make sure the ward's needs are taken care of, and that the conservatorship is necessitated, and if the conservatorship is not necessitated, then to make action through petition or motion to get that conservatorship removed, right?
You better have a good attorney taking care of your business, because it seems like maybe that was the problem with her situation. She's got a new attorney now.
She does have a new attorney now. So one of the things that I would say is, even if you get denied, right, in the practice of law, you win and you lose. I mean, that's part of it. Every time that you tee it up, there's somebody else on the other side of you that wants to tee it up in the opposite way. So it's a fight, right? So you got these battles, and somebody's going to win. So even if that lawyer lost those battles, we still need to see evidence of those battles. So for 13 years, we didn't see motions, we didn't see petitions, we didn't see affidavits, we didn't see testimony from Britney, we didn't see anything like that, right? We didn't see people asking Britney's fans, people asking Britney's sister, people asking Britney's mom, people asking Britney's kids, what they thought about Britney, whether Britney could compete for herself. We didn't see, I mean, you're Britney Spears. You got money. You need a doctor. If you don't want to be in a conservatorship, you have a doctor follow you around and do a day in the life every month. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Take pictures of you.
That's right.
Go into tests. Find 50 doctors. I mean, you guys, if Britney Spears can be trapped in a conservatorship, maybe the conservatorship system has some faults. Because Britney Spears has wealth and power. There's other people out there that have no wealth and have no power. Britney Spears can afford to hire new doctors, afford to hire new lawyers. Other wards, these people that are incapable or could be considered incapable of managing their estate and affairs are right on the cusp of it. They don't have those kinds of resources. So if they don't have those kinds of resources, it becomes incumbent upon the public sector, that's us and our taxpayer dollars and our judges and our lawyers, to go out there and protect these people, not only from themselves in the case of a necessitated wardship or a necessitated conservatorship, but from overzealous family members or overzealous parties that might be trying to take advantage of them. Just because you don't keep a perfectly balanced checkbook, like me, because I don't, just because you don't keep a perfectly balanced checkbook does not mean that you are incompetent. Just because you didn't take your laundry to the cleaners on Wednesday as you had planned and do it the next week, it may mean you missed a date. It may mean you did something wrong, but it does not mean you're incapable of managing your estate and affairs. And another argument is, just because you have been committed, even, just because you had to go to a mental health facility to take care of some anxiety issues, or maybe get on some medication to take care of anxiety issues, or maybe you got some insomnia, or maybe you rushed into a marriage. just because those things are present does not necessarily mean you're incompetent to manage your estate and affairs, and doesn't mean in Mississippi, pursuant to the GAP Act, that a physician could come in and take those sheets out. So think about the power that Britney Spears has. Think about it happened to her. Be aware of those people around you. Understand what conservatorships are, and now we can walk around with sort of that good fortune of knowing how the world works. There are a lot of people out there in conservatorships, Britney Spears being the most prominent.
There are a lot of people in the conservatorships, and you know, where there's money, there's usually going to be some
jostling.
Some jostling of some nature, and so there's a good example of money and jostling, you know, even within the family, you know.
One thing that I would like to say, guys, is Edward's right. Brittany has a new lawyer, and that new lawyer is out there working for Brittany. Now, I read something in the papers yesterday, which I thought was sort of funny, right? So Britney Spears' new lawyer, Brittany, of course, has endless wealth. She needs a new lawyer. The new lawyer knows that he needs to petition to remove that conservatorship, right? Well, they asked him about it yesterday, and he said, we are working to prepare the petition to remove the conservator, right? Well, here's what's funny for me as a practitioner of law, right? This guy's got any associate attorneys he'd ever want to hire, right? He could hire anybody he wants. He's got a big law firm. Britney Spears is his most prominent client, right? This thing has been going on for 13 years, but still, he tells the press and the client that he's typing it up, and that's what a lawyer does. Call your lawyer and ask him, hey, look, I'm really ready to get that thing done, and they're going to say, we're working on it. So if a local lawyer like me or somebody else tells you you're working on it, understand that you are not the only one who a lawyer has reported that they're working on it for. Even Britney Spears, who's just hired a brand new lawyer and probably paid him $1 million retainer, he's working on it, Edward.
But you know,
that's funny, Edward. Come on.
It is funny. You know, the idea that attorneys, you know, you have to be able to shift gears quick, don't you?
Yeah, you do. And I get it completely. In his circumstance, what he's probably doing is drafting some 150-page petition that integrates all of her old previous medical exams, everything that previously happened. Like, they probably got some impeachment testimony against her father. They've probably got her affidavits of her sister and affidavits of her mother, maybe elicit some live testimony from them. They're probably going to have doctors in. I mean, it's going to be a big, beautiful document, and you don't want to rush it. But if you're just a member of the public, or just me, for instance, you're like, well, go ahead and get it filed. File it right away.
Right.
You know, we've been waiting for this for 13 years. File the document, and then after you file the document, what do? Well, go ahead and get a hearing immediately. But there's a docket call, and there's the judge, and justice moves slow. We've all heard that.
It does. Yeah.
But just go ahead and file the document, man. We're ready to see it.
How much does the father make? Do we know?
Yeah, I think he makes 1.5% of everything, but I think it works out. I've heard like $35,000, $40,000 a month, easy, just off of Britney's.
Wow. Yeah, but there you go. I mean, he doesn't want to give that up.
No, would you?
No, I guess
it's
not.
wonderful. I mean, you wouldn't want to give up a gig like that. I've had cases where you've got a trustee over a big trust, and you're like, hey, you know, you're not really serving the purpose of it. And they fight hook and crook. That's a livelihood.
It's a livelihood.
A lot easier to be the conservator of or a trustee than it is to go out there and earn it day to day.
Right, right.
In the grip and slot of the big wild world.
Well, this is great to be here with you on this live edition of Law Focus.
I'm glad to be here with you.
Yeah, it's fun, and thank you for being here, and congratulations on the statewide award.
A joint award.
Mississippi Association of Broadcasters, Law Focus.
But for, I mean, Edward taught me how to do this.
Public Affairs Program winner among competition across the state. So it's great. It's good to be. It's good for somebody to say, "Well, that's a pretty good show." We think we do a pretty good show, but
yeah, now somebody else told it. And congratulations to Ocean 7 and the Ocean 7 family for the ratings push.
For being in the
we're
ratings.
rocking.
Yeah, we popped up, so that's good. Hopefully, we can stay in there. Okay, good. Well, thank you, Nathan.
We're COVID bumping, or we're shaking to shaking.
Thank you.
Bye.
And we'll see you next time on Law Focus.
Hey, thanks for watching. Give me a call.